Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope that my Global UGrad series has been helping you in your application so far. In today's video, I will be talking about the steps if you're shortlisted and if you're selected for the program. If your application is shortlisted, you will have to go for a selection interview. If you're selected, you will have to go for a TOEFL exam if you don't already have the certification, and then you have to go for the US visa interview and also a medical checkup. So let's first talk about the selection interview. First of all, dress to impress. This is not really a rule, but I think it's more of a conscious grooming awareness thing. As they say, first impression means a lot. Don't wear slippers, don't wear jeans, don't wear shorts, wear like proper formal shirt. So if you want to wear office wear, which I feel is a bit tacky, that is far more better than wearing sloppy. So unless you're doing your interview online through the webcam, then you can wear anything on the bottom, and just make sure that your top is proper. For this interview, it will be based mostly on your application, so make sure that you know your application really well, because it's weird if they already run through your application and when they ask you questions about your application, your answer differs from the application that you submitted yourself. Be prepared to give clarification and explanations. First things first, of course, they will ask you to introduce yourself. So just introduce your name, your background, like where you're from, where did you study, what you're studying, and then they will ask you about your interests, your hobbies. Feel free to elaborate more, but just don't lie. Like if you don't like to read, don't write that you're interested in reading just because it makes you seem more intellectual. Because I mean, everyone has different hobbies, different interests. Nothing wrong. So during my interview, one of my hobby was to read, and they actually asked like what kind of books that I like to read, what's the genre, what's my favorite book and stuff like that. I don't read super often, but when I do read, I kind of like to read non-fiction. At the point of my interview, I was reading the book called Cannibal Killers. It's not the best book title to bring up during a scholarship interview to the US, but as long as you can bring out a good reason or justification on why you like to read the book, I think it'll be fine. So what I said was, the reason why I like to read that particular book that I was reading is because I like to observe people, I like to understand behaviors, I like to know what other people are thinking and why they behave in a certain way. So reading that book gives me an insight to how all these psycho people think and why they do what they do. But if you're not good at coming up with good reasoning, I would say to just stay away from all this risky stuff. So in the application, there's a part about the community service. So they will also ask you about that, because Global UGrad or World Learning in general is huge on community service. In the interview, they will also ask you why you want to be selected. So be sure to come prepared with the 101 reasons on why you want to be selected for this program. Besides the questions that will be based on your application, they will also ask you something very different, which is current issues. So you better know the current issues of your country especially, and a bit about the world. So since I was studying economics, or my friends would say economics, I can never pronounce that right, but they asked me about some current economic issues that were happening at the time of my interview. They also asked me about the political situation at that point of time. So I would say that you can take either sides, but just make sure that your answers are not too biased to one side or the other, because it doesn't look very good. But as long as you can come up with good justifications and good reasoning on why you support a certain thing as opposed to another, and then that's okay, because I think they just want to see that you are aware of the current situation. And the point of this interview is for them to understand your thought process. So one of the interviewers from the panel of 5 people, he actually said that my answers sound very politician-like. I don't know, maybe because I tend to like to take a stand but remain kind of neutral. So I will always say like why this is good and this is not so good. And I would always give pros and cons to 2 different sides, just to remain kind of like neutral. That's just how I like to do. Because I mean, I can't be saying something great about my country and something shitty about their country, because they are the one giving me the scholarship. And at the same time, I can't be saying like all these amazing things about their country and say all the shitty things about my country, because that just means that I'm a freaking traitor. And anyway, everything in this world has pros and cons, so just use that pros and cons things, and I believe it's kind of safe. Now on to the TOEFL exam. TOEFL exam is really simple. You just get the textbook and you do all of the exercises. I feel like language is a lifelong process, so you can't expect to improve like a great amount within like, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks. But I would say if you have just a limited time before your exam to study, do all the exercises, the reading, writing, and listening. And for speaking, you should also practice, because there's a certain time frame for each question for you to answer. So that will help you to familiarize with like the duration for each question. Okay, now for the part where a lot of people are very nervous for, the US visa interview. It's totally okay and it's totally normal to be nervous, but just make sure that you keep your nerves calm and be as calm as possible, because if you're really nervous, even if you didn't do anything wrong, it will look really suspicious. That's the point of the interview, to pick up on all this suspicious activity and to not grant you the visa. So just don't do anything that makes you look suspicious. At the point of time of your interview, they will already have all your documents submitted to them. So basically they will just ask you questions based on your document. So again, make sure that you know your application and your documents really well, and just be really honest, like be really honest and clarify when there needs to be a clarification. Because with a lot of things that deals with communication, the reason why communication breakdowns happen is because there's a lack of explanation. So think of it as, if you don't explain, people don't know because they can't read your mind. So make sure that you explain. Sometimes they'll also ask you kind of seemingly silly questions, like who is your sponsor for this scholarship? And in my head, I'm just like, your government, but that's just meant to be kept in your head. So I was just like, oh, it's the US Department of State. Then, and last but not least, it's the medical checkup, which to me is the most tedious part of all. I don't like doing medical checkup because it takes the entire day. And for me, I went to the government clinic, and most of the medical officers in public clinics or hospitals here in Malaysia, they are kind of rude and they always seem to have something up their asses. When you really need their help, you just have to deal with it. It's a full body checkup from head to toe, your eyesight, everything. But I think the most important part is actually the immunization. So as babies or kids, you will have like a lot of immunizations and vaccinations. That is a bit tedious because you have to bring that all out and put the date that you got those injections done. Because if you don't have a record, you have to retake them. For those who doesn't like needles, that might be quite a pain to go through. So for the immunizations, it would be for like tetanus, I don't know how you pronounce that, tetanus, rubella, measles, and things like that. And then there will also be a TB test that is required. There are 2 types of TB tests. One is the skin test and one is the blood test. So skin test is the cheaper alternative, but it's also the less accurate option, especially if you have a BCG history, because it may interfere with the result of the skin test. I went for the skin test because it was a cheaper alternative and I didn't know that there was a difference between those two. But when I went to the US, the student health clinic at my university, they required a retest, which is a blood test, and all the graduates in the same university as me had to retake the test. I don't know if my friends did blood tests back in their home country, but either way, I think they won't really trust our medical expertise, which, excuse me, Malaysia's medical field is like top notch, but I guess they just have trust issues with like us coming from a third world country. So we had to redo a blood test there, which is kind of expensive, but it's covered by the insurance that you get. So that concludes this video. As I said, it's perfectly normal to be nervous before you go for the interview or even your test, but just keep those nerves calm. If you have to like spray lavender perfume all over yourself to calm those nerves, do it. And as usual, if you have any questions at all, just leave them down in the comment section and I will answer to the best that I can. So don't forget to like this video by giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more videos. See you in my next video. Bye!